everybody, and welcome to the channel. Today we'll be reading two different stories. One about a near abduction and a near kidnapping. If you have any stories you would like to share, please check out the description on where to contact me, and your story might get featured in the next video. Enough about that, onto the video. This all started 2 years ago when my mother came to visit me at my work. It's important to mention that before this I had last seen my mother when I was 6 years old at the local amusement mall. She had placed me on a carousel of horses and placed a note in my hand for my father to find. Years later I found the note saying she needed to go home and that it was time she go back to her people. I never fully understood what that meant until recently. Secondly, my father was found dead a few weeks prior to this. He had been delivered to a morgue with a name tag. His organs had been removed and he had been found stitched up perfectly. Thirdly, when she came to me, it was 20 years later and I did not recognize her. I was working as a waitress for a restaurant that is well respected and the tips are great. I remember it was a quiet shift, a Wednesday afternoon. An hour before my shift was about to end, I was talking to a friend I had made, a fellow waitress. She was cute, bubbly, and we always had each other's backs when one needed a cover. She and I were talking about the latest episode of whatever show we were fascinated by at the time, until we noticed a woman step in. The woman didn't look a day older than I did, but immediately I was hit by a wave of chills. The restaurant phone began to ring and my friend went to go answer it, most likely taking an order from a customer. Meanwhile, I felt dumbstruck by the woman in front of me, and I felt as if I knew her. But where and when is what confused me. The woman smiled and approached me. She held out her hand and said, "Hello, my girl." Trying to be polite, I stupidly shook her hand. In the moment I did, suddenly all memories of my mother came flooding back to my mind. Crystal clear images that were enough to tell me that the woman in front of me was my mother, and that she had not aged since the last day I saw her. "How?" I gasped, too scared to say anything more than that. The woman smiled and said, "Do not worry or be frightened. I would like to talk to you about something special. When your shift ends, you know where to meet me." And after that, she spun around and walked out of the building. "Hello? Hello?" I heard my friend repeat a few times. When I turned to her, she looked annoyed. Prank callers placing orders and then hanging up. "Hey, are you okay?" I nodded, not sure how to explain my complicated dilemma. But I remained silent for the rest of my shift. When it ended, our replacements for the evening stepped in and I left. Before I could make my hurried path down to my mother, my friend stopped me and said, "Why don't you come over for a drink or two with me?" As I was about to decline, she suddenly stood up straight and walked away without saying another word. This scared me once more, and I very quickly made my way to the car. I sat in silence in the dark parking lot for a few minutes. Normally this scene scared me to be alone in, but right now it was more comforting than ever. After a while, I sucked it up and started my car. I drove down to the amusement park to discover it was packed with people. I found a parking and made my way inside. I hesitated a few times as I made my way towards the carousel and stopped beside a woman who stood facing the large machine with her arms folded in front of her chest. "I hope you realize I never wanted to leave you, but I had to," she said. This had only angered me enough to start throwing all the questions that had been bothering me that evening. "What the hell is going on? Who are you and what the hell do you want?" "I am your mother, but I am not from here. I'm from another system that is unknown to your planet." I told her that I didn't believe her and that I was going to call the cops. The moment I said that, she told me to look up. I did and saw a large circular vehicle flying high in the sky. Around it were many small white lights. They weren't stars, they were circling the ship. I looked back at the woman claiming to be my mother, and then at the people around us. No one was moving. Everyone had frozen as if time had been paused, yet all the machines were still running. The carousel was moving, music was still blaring, and the wind blew among people. It felt like being alone in an active cemetery. A bright green light shined down on us, and I looked up. The spacecraft above us had opened in the center, and the green light was coming from it. I quickly stepped out of the light and looked back at the woman. "Did you kill my father?" I asked her. She told me that she did what she had to make her people happy because she accidentally fell in love with a human. She added that she would not kill me because I am her daughter and that there are many of my species out there like me. Some made the decision to go home to her planet. I took another step away and told her I liked it here and that I did not trust her enough to leave with her, especially after what she did to my father. She told me she understood, and that when I turned the right age, she would have no choice but to come collect me. She stepped into the center of the green light and faded into it. The light disappeared and I looked up to see that the ship was gone as well. The people around me unfroze and carried on with their evening as if nothing had happened. I remember going home to my apartment, locking the door and not getting much sleep that night. The next day, I got my dog Rover to protect me, and I added a tighter security system. Every year when my birthday arrives, I get nervous, but luckily I haven't seen the woman again yet. I hope I never have to see her again, but knowing she will still come for me scares me and keeps me up most nights. When I was 7, my parents and their friends wanted to try a weekend where we all went camping in nearby forests close to home. I luckily wasn't the only child there. In total, we were about 5 kids roughly the same age. The oldest kid was a boy who was 10 years old. His name was Tommy. The first night of camping was fun, despite a lot of us having to leave our electronics behind at home. Each family had their own tent or RV. We luckily had the RV. The first night we had an early barbecue, played hide and seek within the area, sat around the fire and listened to the adults tell ghost stories, ate s'mores and got to light sparklers. By the time it started to get late, the temperature had dropped. A lot of the kids, including me, went to their tents or RVs and called it a night. I recall that night waking up about an hour or so later because I had heard a noise by the RV's window opposite me. I had a small battery-powered nightlight on beside me, which reflected its light up against the window, clearly preventing me from seeing what I did. What I could see was a man who was not a part of the group. It was a man who was watching me and wore an olive green cap on his head. I remember freezing up, scared for my life. He was watching me. Suddenly, he quickly moved away from the window, and a few moments later, I heard footsteps approach the door. The door opened, and my parents walked in. I told them about the man, and they told me not to worry about it, that I was just dreaming and imagining it all. I insisted that I was awake, and they then shrugged it off as it being someone else in the camp, that it was nothing to worry about. They did lock the door anyway, and when they went to bed, they closed the curtains. Only then could I relax and go back to sleep. By morning, I was convinced by my parents that it was all a dream, and I didn't think twice about it. The day was fun. We went fishing. The other kids and I got to swim in the lake. We had lunch and we got to roleplay as superheroes together. I remember playing as Black Widow, because she's my favorite. But night came again. We ate supper and more s'mores, lit what was left of the sparklers, and we decided to play hide and seek within the campsite again. Being the oldest, Tommy was the one who had to look for us. I recall wanting to be extra clever with my hiding spot and chose to hide underneath my parents' RV. I hid under there for about 10 minutes before I noticed someone walking towards the RV. I kept quiet as I watched the pair of feet make their way towards the window I had seen someone watching me through. All fear came to me as I realized what I had seen the previous night was not a figment of my imagination. I was scared again, but I was smart enough to keep quiet and not move. A few minutes passed and I heard Tommy calling out my name, coming closer. The man suddenly moved away from the RV and walked off, away from the RV and a few tents. I remember crying out of relief and fear and waited for a few minutes to pass. When they had, I crawled out from under the RV and ran to my parents. I started to explain that I saw the man again, and then they took me seriously. The other parents called their kids, and Tommy was the only one who was not showing up. He was missing. Police were called to investigate immediately, and they had found DNA on the RV that did not belong to anyone that was at the camp. They had come across some prints to where Tommy's path ended, deeper in the forest, with a bigger pair of footprints accompanying Tommy's. Tommy or the man were never found. It's been 17 years later and I still have nightmares about the man, about what happened to Tommy and what could have happened to me. We have never been camping since.